Welcome to the HR Chat Show, one of the world's most downloaded and shared podcasts designed for HR pros, talent execs, tech enthusiasts, and business leaders. For hundreds more episodes and what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit HRgazette.com.
Welcome to another episode of the HR Chat Show. Hello, listeners. This is your host today, Bill Banham, and joining me on the show for the very first time is Kevin Empey, an internationally recognized expert on the future of work, adaptive leadership, and career and personal agility. Kevin is the founder and managing director of Work Matters and the author of Thrive in the Future of Work. Over a career spanning more than 3 decades, Kevin's advised organizations on navigating transformation, led pioneering research into the future of work, and held several senior leadership roles, including director and partner at Willis Towers Watson. He's also program director of the flagship senior executive program at the Irish Management Institute, senior adjunct teaching fellow over at Trinity Executive Education, and creator of Drive, the career navigation system. Kevin has been recognized on the HR Most Influential Thinkers list and has received multiple national and international awards for his work in the future of work, employment activation, and social entrepreneurship. Kevin, how are you doing today? Thank you very much for joining me on the pod.
Very good to see you, and thank you for having me on. Congratulations to you on podcast and Disrupt HR and everything else you're doing.
Thank you very much. Let's get into it then. So you've spent more than 30 years, Kevin, helping organizations navigate change. Looking back now, what do you believe has fundamentally changed about work over the past, say, decade? And what do HR leaders still underestimate about the future?
I think, yes, if I take you back just a little bit, I mean, when I started getting very curious about this topic was probably about that time, 10, 15 years ago. But if you just go back a little bit, even turn of the century, do you remember we were in kind of dot-com kind of territory? Then we had the financial crisis, and then we get into all the digitalization agenda. What was iPhone 2007? 2008 Airbnb. You started to get that hyper-digitalization, hyper connectivity. Massive change in that first sort of 10, 15 years of the century. And I remember being on an employee of the future task force. I think it was 2018. And even then, people think this is only recent stuff in terms of pace and uncertainty and so on. But then employees were really concerned about 2 or 3 things. One was flexibility. Bill, isn't it interesting? I remember this is 2018. Flexibility in terms of their work lives, childcare, elder care, commuting distances, rents, house prices, access to such amazing technology, but yet not having flexibility to use that technology in their work, right? And in their daily lives. And then comes COVID, but another thing, of course, was of that time, as well as flexibility, was concern about skills, concern about the future and the pace of change and how technology was going to impact them. And that was 2018, which seems like so long ago now, because since then we've had, of course, COVID, which has changed the relationship with work in so many ways, particularly the where question of work. And now, fast on COVID's heels, we have, I suppose, the topic of the day, the AI agenda, really impacting what work gets done and how work gets done, right? So literally over that period, but accelerated over the last 10 years, has been huge difference to how and where work gets done. But I think also an underlying question about employees' sense of agency in that. I mean, it's quite interesting. When you think about big, huge changes to the world of work over the last, 10, 40, 50 years, a lot of those changes, Bill, have been top down, from the organization perspective. But things like COVID and AI, or at least hybrid working, should I say, remote working and AI, has been huge changes for the individual. The individual is having a say now in terms of, where they work and what tools and what they can do in terms of changing how work gets done. So a hell of a lot of change is the answer, but certainly accelerated exponentially in the last 10 years, and employees having perhaps more of a say in how and where work gets done compared to maybe times gone by. I don't know what you think.
What do I think? I was just making a few notes there. Okay, so you mentioned COVID changed the where agenda. You spoke about employee sense of agency and AI and how that's affecting the types of work that we do. What do I think? I would question the where agenda in terms of COVID and what that's changed based on the conversations that I'm having. I feel like a lot of people are getting pushed back into the office. We all celebrated for 4 years, something like that, 2020 through to about 2024, that it doesn't matter where you are. If you're a good employee and you do a good job, you can work wherever. And then it became, well, we kind of need you on the same time zone. And then it became, well, we kind of need you back in the office 1 day a week. And now I'm consistently hearing from leaders at large organizations that it's a minimum requirement of 3 or 4 days in the office.
Yeah, you've got that, haven't you? You've got that sort of phase 2 of that whole COVID, which we won't get into that rabbit hole right now. But what I would suggest maybe is that no matter where the pendulum ends up settling, I think that we've opened up a Pandora's box in terms of the longer term future of work, in terms of where, first of all, employers getting the message that they can actually access skills and work from anywhere. They can go to that extent. They don't rely on a labor force coming into one place at one particular time. They may want that for their core working group in terms of culture and all the things, all the arguments that are out there, but they don't have to for all their work. They've got now technology and AI to really kick in as well. And from the employee point of view, even though with their current employer, they may be feeling the heat to come in more often, there's been a seed set in their minds, though, in terms of their own futures regarding their choices, regarding where they work. So they may stay with their current employer because of that, or they may be starting to think about, well, actually, in my future, I might want more flexibility because I've had a bit of a taste of it and I want to have more. And I think that's one difference. And I think there's a little bit of a small battle has been won in the sense of, look, if I have big life things going on in my normal life, that there is the employer is probably going to flex in some sense around that, around my other priorities more than maybe I would have experienced before, even if it's not the 3 days a week I'd love to be out of the office and so on. So I think that something has changed in that where work is done, if a bit of a pullback from where we were.
When you going to the second part of your answer, your first answer, when you talk about the employee sense of agency, are we talking there about ultimately employees today feel like they've got other opportunities to move, and if a company doesn't treat them well, if the company culture is not correct, then they've got options? Because if that is what you're talking about, I'd question that as well. I'd connect that with AI and how that's affecting how we work today. I think a lot of people are terrified about losing their jobs, and I feel like compared to a couple of years ago, Kevin, where those conversations were still around making sure that the company culture fits the employee, what I'm hearing a lot now is it's more about the employee needing to stay under the radar, to stay relevant, to make sure they're being upskilled or reskilled, and keep within the organization, because so many positions are not being replaced. They're, or at least not being replaced by humans. They're now being augmented by AI. What's your take on that?
Yeah, there's so much in that, and of course these things go through cycles, as we know, and there currently would be that sense of fear, a little bit of fear, a bit of uncertainty, and the devil I know a little bit, etc. How we go through this phase. I think, like ever, it's your top talent and those who are confident in their own skill sets who probably are feeling that, look, I'm not going to let this time pass. I feel like I am good at what I do. And if I don't like the environment in which I'm in now, I will have choice, but I will make that choice. I think that's what I'm saying, Bill, is that I'm making that choice to stay or to go, if you like. And I think there's, when people see the range and the way work is changing and the jobs that, didn't never existed before, but that are now emerging, people are beginning to see, gosh, there's going to be so much more to my future career. There's going to be a lot of difference than maybe the assumptions I've built up to form what my career and what my next step looks like have been disrupted. So I may stay here in the short term, but actually I'm going to have to be on my guard, because I might look for things that either suit me or suit my talents more, and I might look for those elsewhere, as well as internally. But it's almost like Bill, I feel this is maybe related to another topic we might get into, but I feel there's been a shift. What Rosabeth Moss Kanter talked about nearly 20 years ago now, she mentioned that a new employment deal is needed for the 21st century, right? And I just feel that is actually happening. You mentioned what employers might be thinking of doing, and I do feel that we are shedding some of those 20th century type of norms around work processes, careers, roles, structures, contracts, length of time in jobs and so on, what people do and for how long they do it. I do feel that some of those norms and expectations of the sort of 20th century are giving way to some of the 21st century realities, in terms of speed of change, skills acquisition, flexibility regarding the career path that I thought I was on, but now I might need to think about pivoting onto something else, exactly, etc. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's a two-way thing. I think that's employees also needing to engage with that question as well as employers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HRchat Podcast. If you enjoy the audio content we produce, you'll love our articles on the HR Gazette. Learn more at hrgazette.com. And now, back to the show.
Are there still a lot of senior leaders out there who are grappling with these 21st century priorities?
I think so. I think that's a very natural thing, because so many of our ways of working and our norms and our maybe more command control or more traditional ways of organizing ourselves have been so successful for us up to this point, and even for the first 10, 20 years of the century. But you just get a sense that some of those ways are just not serving us. So when you take, for instance, Bill, just take the COVID example. There was no playbook, right? There was no playbook to that. So we had to collectively come up with a solution to that. And, we muddled our way through. It's just that those type of disruptions to work and to business life are coming at us with more frequency. So that idea of having to deal with more disruption and bigger scale disruption is something more common in today's kind of ways of working and organizing ourselves than maybe we experienced before. So I think there is a difference to what the employment deal is. I think there's a difference to ways of working. I think there's a difference to the narrative, if you like, that organizations probably need to have with their employees, which is probably perhaps more adult to adult one than maybe existed before, where the sort of traditional, contract and employment kind of rules pertained.
Which is a fantastic lead in to my next question. So well done. You must be a mind reader. A recent LinkedIn post of yours argues that we're facing not simply an engagement problem, but an alignment gap, were your words, between leaders and employees. So I guess kind of following on from what we've spoken about so far, what exactly do you mean by that, Kevin? And why do you think this framing is more useful than traditional discussions around engagement?
I guess, and this is necessarily coming from me. It's coming from employers, particularly talking a little bit about their agendas, their change agendas over the next few years, Bill, and talking about what we have to do to change our business model, to keep up with the technology, to be ready for disruption, and so on. And talking about how maybe where their employees are in those kind of ways. So in other words, the train is leaving a station, right? And the employees, in some cases, not everybody, but there's some cases, well, employees, are they still on the platform, trying to wonder, are they going to get on this train or not? So that's what I mean by an alignment gap, is that employees, maybe to your point earlier, are a bit concerned maybe about jobs, a bit concerned about their skill set and about where things are going, but also wanting maybe some flexibility in their working lives and so on. They're looking at well, what's in this for me piece, if I suppose. And whereas the employers are looking at, no, we've got a serious business agenda. We want you on that bus, if I've changed the transport metaphors. We want you on that bus. In fact, you've been really key part to our story so far. But you need to play a part in that as well. And therefore, is the alignment between the business agenda and the employer's agenda and the employee agenda, their needs and wants, and the employer's needs and wants. What I'm raising a question is whether that alignment between those interests is where it needs to be, rather than just traditional kind of ways of trying to push, messaging and kind of logic about this is our next business plan, this is where we're going. That actually there's something a bit more emotional required in terms of really bringing people along the change journey with us, because employees are complaining about, rightly so in many cases, some burnout. They're feeling overwhelmed. They're concerned about technology overload. They're saying, okay, I've increased some productivity with AI, but my life doesn't seem to be getting any easier. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's that sort of that kind of narrative, if you like, that's going on amongst employees is not quite the same as I'm hearing in the narrative in terms of employers and where they want to get. So how do we close that gap is the next question, really, isn't it?
So why is this an inflection point? Why is this time different? Because I've been in this space quite a while now, since before I went grey. And terms like absenteeism and presenteeism and burnout and whatnot, these are not new terms. These are things that folks were dealing with when it was a less of a disruptive world. There are less contextual things happening around us, whether that's AI or wars in different places or a faltering economy or whatever else it might be, COVID a few years ago. Well, how is it different now?
I think I totally agree with you. The world of work has always changed, and we've always adapted successfully in that, haven't we? And therefore, like, what's so different about this time? I think it's a really, really important question, because if we can't answer that question, then we can't frame the right solutions around that. And I think pace. I think pace is, I think nobody can argue with that. If you look at the pace of change and disruption, I just named off 3 or 4 in 10, 15 years. We didn't have anything like those episodic changes in the previous 50 years. Some would say 100 years. So pace of change, I think with the pace of change and this particularly technology, I think uncertainty is on the increase. And again, the Economic Intelligence Unit actually track uncertainty, and you can imagine the way it's going. The graph is going in an exponential horizontal, way compared. It's not just a steady increase; it's exponential in terms of uncertainty. What that means is day-to-day level is optionality. So employers have different options. Maybe employees are thinking about different options. There's different scenarios in terms of geopolitics and all kinds of things. So uncertainty, pace of change, bringing complexity. And I do think that the role of the employee, I think the new generation as well, the younger, are more vocal about, and others, about what they need and what they want from work, how work is fitting in with the rest of their lives, and what they expect from work and from employers. I mean, again, talking to the leaders of a legal firm who, traditionally depended on that 20th century kind of pipeline model. I mentioned the 20th century norms a minute ago. The expectation that we get an X number of graduates in and they all go up and they all, an X percent become partner, it's just been completely disrupted. So there's no doubt that even though you might say that it might be a difficult time, a concerning time for employees regarding job security, I do think there is an underlying trend about employee, worker agency and looking for different things from work than they say would have done even 10, 20 years ago. So I think that what I call, Bill, a future of work cocktail, I think it's not one thing or another. I think it's that cocktail, that mix of things that marks this time out to be different than certainly previous cycles I've experienced or indeed studied. I think we're in a particularly interesting time right now, and I think AI again is probably the sort of the thing in the background that's concerning even the jobs and the tasks I do and the profession I choose is under question, now, and whereas it wouldn't have been necessarily, 5, 10, 15 years ago.
We are already coming towards the end of this particular conversation, Kevin. I had so many other questions that I wanted to ask of you today, but we went in different directions. That's on me, but I hope listeners have found it useful so far. Just 2 more questions for you before we do wrap up for today. Next one is around something that I'm quite passionate about, something I talk about quite a lot, and that's opportunities for young people. Given everything we've spoken about so far, the disruption, the uncertainty around jobs, what we're all seeing. So take in the UK, for example, where I am, it's now at around 1 million young people between 16 and 24 who are NEETs, not in education, employment or training. That's crazy. I know the stats in Ireland are a lot stronger, but we're all facing a reality where young people are just struggling to get into the workforce,
Yep.
to add value, to work with these other generations. Where do we go from here? How do we support those folks so they're not left behind?
No, that's a great expression. Nobody should be left behind in this future of work, chapter that's emerging right now. And clearly, a lot of attention on that early career has been brought up in terms of. And I think one thing we have to completely there is some evidence of this. People may be reframing what does early career look like? What does a graduate job look like? And if we continue, this again is that 20th century versus 21st century again, Bill. If we continue to see graduate jobs as being what they were, then there's no argument that automation and technology could take up some of that work. There's no question. But if we reimagine, though, what a graduate and what an entry job could look like in terms of utilizing these tools and getting involved in those change agendas from earlier on using their profile, you can see how that actually it's so short term not to be thinking about a pipeline and bringing youth and particularly talented youth into the organization. Where is the next line going to come from? But it will require a different view and a different design of what work actually looks like in those earlier pieces. That's on the employer side. I do think, though, there's a bit of support and challenge and even tough love required here. And that's why we created Drive, which is basically a career navigation system. And it's about building career navigation capability for the changing world of work that we're in, not just for the younger cohorts, but indeed for mid-career as well, who are also looking at the next 10, 20, 30 years of their career. And you're thinking about longer working lives, you're thinking about pensions and everything else. And so at not just the younger workforce, but I think in different cohorts too, there's a concern. And what we need more than ever, and I think this is beyond doubt, is better kind of career navigation skills, because the reason why we need it now more than ever is because we're going to get our careers disrupted more, than we've ever had before, including early careers. So therefore, that's why we've found, great reaction to the Drive system, is because it's actually giving people their own skill set to navigate their futures and not expecting the employer to have all the answers, which they won't. So it's the idea of this more adult to adult co-creation of the future as opposed to, employer-led only. So I think that's a fundamental for me, and that's spawns from my work around personal agility as well, being the sort of skill set for the changing world of work, because we simply have to be able to navigate this disruption, and whether that's from a career perspective or a purpose, because if we don't build, like, the whole point about work and working life, it should be an enjoyable part of our overall lives. And that's why the book, Thrive in the Future of Work, I could have called it Cope in the Future of Work, but where's the point in that? We've got to find ways of thriving. And I think that career navigation piece will be a fundamental one, not just for employers, but for employees as well.
I hope you are right. Regular listeners of this show know that I'm a bit more skeptical about the future of work. I want you to be right. I want it to be more of an optimistic take on that. Okay, we are.
I'm going to have to challenge you on that then. So yeah, you have to give me a return. I have to come back for part B, and I'll come right back to you as to why
exactly. I'll be Mr. Grumpy. You can be Mr. Happy. Okay, but before we do wrap up for today, though, Kevin, how can folks connect with you? Is that LinkedIn? Do you want to share your email address? Are you super cool and all over TikTok and places? And of course, how can they get a copy of your book, Thrive in the Future of Work?
I think website workmatters.ie, or just reach out on LinkedIn. You catch me there, kevin.empey@workmatters.ie. Email. Love to connect with folks on this and have debates just like this one, Bill, because it's only by debating this and having a bit of yin and yang we're going to get to the right answer on this. I think you're right to sort of say it shouldn't be overly. There's it's neither, to be pessimistic or optimistic. Both are wrong, right? So we've got to have actually both. That it is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. We've got to look at it in that. That's part of the paradox on this new world, is that it's both. It's not one or the other. So anyway, hopefully it'll keep going for the work. Will keep going for a few more years at least, Bill.
Until the Terminators turn up at our doorstep. That just leaves me to say for today, Kevin, I've gotten to meet you a couple of times now at Disrupt Dublin events. You're an absolute gent, highly respected in Ireland and throughout the world. It's an absolute pleasure for the first time, and not the last, I hope, to have you on the show with me today. Thank you.
All right, Bill. Cheers. Thank you very much.
And listeners, as always, until next time, happy working.
Thanks for listening to the HR Chat Show. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and listen to some of the hundreds of episodes published by HR Gazette? And remember, for what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.